Huh.
Hello and welcome to Rocket PC Gaming. My name is Rocket, and in today's video we're going to show you how to make a very simple rocket to get to orbit. This is the second most common thing that most people ask me on my live stream, is how do I get to orbit? I've been playing KSP for eons, or hundreds of hours, or I'm brand new to KSP and I still can't figure out how to get to orbit. So I'm going to show you very quickly how to do this. Again, we're going to start with our handy dandy Mark 1 command pod. Zoom in here. I am going to strip it of the monopropellant. It's a little bit of weight savings, and we're also not going to need it. So, we're going to go into our utility section. We're going to grab a parachute. We're going to set the minimum pressure here for 0.7. In the tutorial, I know it says 0.75, but if you deploy it at that, and if you're coming in over anything other than water or grasslands, you're going to become a dirt dart and smack the planet. So 0.7 is a good point. It'll allow you to be able to land anywhere from highlands, deserts. It does not allow mountainous landings though, so you will have to manually adjust it at that point. Alright, next we are going to go over to aerodynamics, and we're going to grab a heat shield. Now a lot of people think that the Mark 1 command pod already has a built-in heat shield. It does not. It just simply has a high heat tolerance. So if we look at it, you'll see it has a max skin temperature of 2200 degrees Kelvin, which is much lower than the heat shield. Now the other thing the heat shield provides is weight at the bottom. So if I turn on the center of mass here, you'll see that the center of mass is towards the bottom of this capsule, and center of mass will always fall towards center of gravity. Okay, so now we're going to go over to structure, and we are going to grab a stack decoupler, and we're going to put that on. Now we're going to grab our fuel tanks. Now I'm going to assume that you're early in your career. If it's not a career mode, you can use the FLT 800. The FLT 800 is 2 of the 400 tanks. But we're going to build the first stage first. I'm getting ahead of myself. Alright, so we're going to grab the FLT 200. We're going to go over here to the engines, and we're going to grab the Terrier, as the Terrier works best in a vacuum from the available engines that we have. Now we're going to back over to structure. We're going to grab our stack decoupler again. Go back to fuel tanks. Now we're going to put in 4 of these FLT 400s. If you're in a career mode and if you have the Terrier engine, these tanks are available to you as they unlock simultaneously. Alright, so now we're going to go back to engines, and we're going to grab our handy dandy trusty swivel LT V45. So now, as with any rocket design, the next thing you want to do is always check, double check, and recheck your staging. So we're starting here with the LT45. We have our decoupler, we have our Terrier engine, and then we have our upper decoupler, and then of course we have our parachute. So now with no fins and nothing more than this, we're going to go to orbit, and I'm going to show you also where to re-enter so that you land back very, very close to the Kerbal Space Center. So let's launch this. Alright, we're going to throttle up. We're going to turn on SAS, and we're going to launch our rocket. Now once we hit about 75 meters a second or so, we're going to start to tip over to the right along the 90-degree vector. The reason we do this is to start our gravity or zero lift turn, as it's also known as. So we're climbing up here on 75. It's not a hard and true 75, it's just in that neighborhood. And again, just like our previous video, we're going to keep the nose, which is this point here, inside of our velocity vector or prograde vector. And we're just going to slowly follow it. The goal here is to reach this 45-degree line at roughly 13,000 to 15,000 meters of altitude above sea level. Now, I've added in a mod with Kerbal Engineer to show me a little bit more information and also be able to kind of show you guys a little bit more. It's not necessary, but it is my favorite mod. So we're just going to kind of trail at the back end of our velocity vector here as we make our way in closer to the 45-degree mark. We're just going to keep following it here. It doesn't matter if you're, a little bit off. It doesn't have to be exactly 15,000 meters or so. It's going to depend on the characteristics of your rocket, how heavy it is, how unwieldy it is. And we're just going to continue. Now we're going to watch our apoapse here, right? And once this reaches about 80, anything above 70 is you're going to be in space. But we're going to stop it at about 80. And then we're just going to stay centered into our prograde vector here. And we're just going to glide up towards our apoapse. Now if I go to the map view, you'll see we have an apoapse of about 80,000 meters. We're going to lose some of that, and that's just from a little bit of drag and gravity pulling back on us. But that's okay. Now as we start to approach this at about, I'd say about 40 seconds out, we're going to start our burn to circularize our orbit. And I'm going to do it from this view just to show you. It's not necessary you do it from the map view. For some people it may be easier. So we're still not quite in space just yet. I will go back to the map view, but we're going to burn out our lower stage here first. And you can't stage from the map view, so it's easier to stage from here. Alright, so now we're in space. We're 1 minute away from our apoapse. I'm going to aim at the horizon here. And then I'm going to go ahead and burn out our main stage. Alright, so we've staged that. Now we're going to stage again because we want to activate the Terrier here. We're not burning just yet. In about 35 seconds, roughly, we're going to start burning again. Now our apoapse is going to change just slightly because we're not exactly on the node. Right? We're not exactly on this node. So what you're doing is when you're over here and if you're burning towards prograde, or the direction you're traveling, you're going to be pushing out the opposite end of your orbit. And that's important to remember in the future because it's going to come in very, very handy. So now when you swap places, they're roughly even with one another, right? So there, we are now in orbit. Okay, so now we want to re-enter. If you go to the west here, right, over this desert biome, you're going to see a mountain range right here, right? If you time warp yourself to this mountain range. Now the planet's going to rotate, so it's going to move on you. But that's okay. It's going to wait for this to come around. I'm going to show you how to re-enter, so you're going to land back very close to KSC. And this will work for anything with an altitude below 150 kilometers or 150,000 meters. If you're above that, you're going to need to adjust your orbit so that you have less velocity. Less velocity means less altitude. So if you're coming back from Moon or Minmus, this will not work directly. You will have to adjust your orbit first if you want to do that. So we're going to time warp again here to this mountain range. Alright, so now we're going to turn prograde or retrograde. So we're going to burn backwards because we're going to lower the other side of our orbit. Now there is an island right here, right? And we're going to start our burn, and we're going to let our trajectory here intercept the planet right below this island. Just like that. So now we can go ahead and do our final staging. We can get rid of that. Now remember what I said about center of mass will always fall towards center of Earth. So even without SAS engaged, and without trying to pilot it, is once we start to enter the atmosphere, the capsule is going to orient itself so that it's coming in tail first. So we're going to time warp till we get into the atmosphere here. We'll time warp a little bit more. Now once we start getting atmospheric effects, I'm going to turn the time warp off. As you can see, the capsule is starting to orientate itself. It's starting to rock, and as we start to get into a thicker atmosphere, it'll start to stabilize. Alright, so now we're starting to get some atmospheric effects. Again, we're not flying the capsule at all. All we're doing is letting gravity do its thing. Now we're going to click this back to surface because we want to know what our surface speed is compared to our orbit speed. Now if you look here, this mountain range right here underneath my mouse, this is that mountain range that you can see that's to the west of the Kerbal Space Center. And this light right here, right above my mouse marker, is the Kerbal Space Center. So now it's just a matter of waiting. And because we set the pressure on our parachute, right, we have it set at 0.7, we can go ahead and stage, which will arm our parachute, and it will automatically deploy at the correct altitude. So we're just going to follow this. Now the re-entry point for this that I showed you with that mountain range on the desert is just for capsules. It will not work for space planes. There's a different entry point to use for space planes because they're not falling through the atmosphere, they're flying. So you actually start your burn quite a bit sooner. So again, here is the runway and the Kerbal Space Center where we lifted off from. Now remember, our parachute's already armed, so we don't have to actually touch anything here. Now we're not exactly at KSC, but we're not that far away. Remember, we're falling through the atmosphere. There's not really any flying involved here. Now at about 2,300 meters over terrain, our parachute will deploy. See, there it goes. And then at 1,000 meters, it will inflate fully. And Jebediah here momentarily will be safe and sound. And that was our upper stage impacting here behind us. And that's how easy it is to go to orbit and come back to the KSC. In our next video, we're going to talk about basics of aircraft design. I hope to see you then.